Hello fellow muggles. Did you know it's been around 10 years since Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out, finishing a movie franchise which itself ran for 10 years? Do you feel old yet? I was 18 at the time, with the emotional maturity of a 15-year-old, and I was pumped.
My body is ready.
I'd read all the books and watched each movie a bunch of times. I can remember my excitement when this poster came out, and how awesome the trailers were. I was on board the Hype Express. Me and my best bud went to see the midnight screening in our small town full of Potterheads. This was it, our last foray into the world we'd grown up with, the final battle. And honestly, we came out a little disappointed. And not just because the yawning abyss of adulthood was all we had to look forward to now. We ended up walking through town until sunrise, unable to pinpoint our problems with the movie. We found it fine, an acceptable way to end a great film series that had meant a lot to us, but it was no Lord of the Rings. It was a deflating feeling. Pottermania was over, and it was time to grow up. Over the years, I sort of forgot about the Potter movies, but many YouTube holes and Harry Potter video essays later, I wondered why the Battle of Hogwarts, as shown in the film, had left no impression on me. Surely now, in 2021, I'd be able to find words for the deflated feeling I had back in 2011. So here it is, an excruciatingly deep dive into the Battle of Hogwarts, as portrayed in the movie. Accio spoilers! I got my notepad, made some popcorn, and hit play, fully expecting to savage this film. I could have called the video, "Here's why the last Harry Potter film was bad actually." After all, surely 18-year-old me had known better than all these dumb critics. I was a true fan. And then, to my surprise, the film was good, especially for the first half. But as I continued watching, my problems with it started to come back to me. Let's get into it. I'll start off with the most bizarre, tone-deaf, and egregious gag, possibly in the whole series. In the raid on Gringotts, Bogrod, the sentient, intelligent goblin, gets burned alive by a dragon.
At least I still got Bogrod.
And it's played for laughs.
That's unfortunate.
What? This comes just a few scenes after Dobby dies in part 1, and we're definitely supposed to care about that magical creature dying. Even Harry, Ron, and Hermione don't really know how to react. You may be thinking, but the goblins are awful for keeping dragons tied up underground, and you have a point. But we don't know anything about Bogrod. He's presumably the branch manager at the bank, but was the dragon his decision? Maybe he's trying to improve animal welfare at Gringotts. Maybe he has a few little goblins to feed back home. We don't know. Why are we supposed to laugh when he gets charred? It's a no from me. Don't get me wrong, the rest of the scene is fantastic, with that wonderful moment where the dragon savors freedom atop a shattered Gringotts. We all quickly forget Bogrod. And I know, this isn't a part of the Battle of Hogwarts, but it is a sign of the weirdness to come. And that weirdness is perfectly exemplified by one character in particular, Minerva McGonagall. Yes, I am a fun sponge, and yes, I do expect to be in the minority here, but I do not enjoy McGonagall in this film. There are two key moments that rankle me. The first is when she sends all the Slytherins to the dungeons, to rapturous applause. What? The sass is off the chain, and the delivery is perfect. But again, the tone is weird. Bigotry isn't determined by House Minerva, it's as if she truly believes that all Slytherins are bad. She doesn't even give them a chance. And before you say that she doesn't actually mean the dungeon, and is referring to the Slytherin common room, I invite you to watch this deleted scene where Filch locks them up, in a castle that's about to be invaded. Wild. And yes, McGonagall is a proud Gryffindor who loves to stick it to the Slytherins, but she would never put students in danger. In the book, they're evacuating the castle for goodness sake, and if they wanted a cool moment for her, there was this amazing quote from the book. "I shall expect you and the Slytherins in the Great Hall in 20 minutes. Also," said Professor McGonagall, "if you wish to leave with your students, we shall not stop you. But if any of you attempt to sabotage our resistance, or take up arms against us within this castle, then Horace, we duel to kill." "Minerva," he said, aghast. "The time has come for Slytherin House to decide upon its loyalties," interrupted Professor McGonagall. Now there is your moment for applause. The next line I'm going to moan about is the ultimate momentum killer, and it comes straight after one of the best build-ups in the entire series. You remember, McGonagall is about to lead the defense of the school, so she casts a spell to animate the suits of armor. Everything about the start of this scene is amazing. The cinematography as the camera flows with the staging of the actors, the tension on their faces, the gorgeous score and sound design as the knights crash down on the beat. Just thinking about it gives me tingles even now. The acting here is everything, and it gets even better with McGonagall's speech to the knights about doing your duty to protect your school. At this point, I am fully swept up in the drama. This is the moment, 10 years in the making. Somehow, this series has made it this far. And then, McGonagall giggles and says to Molly,
"I've always wanted to use that spell."
What? She's almost giddy all of a sudden. What does she mean she's always wanted to cast that spell? Has she always wanted Hogwarts to be attacked, just so she could flex? Molly's expression says it all. It's like, dude, we're having a serious moment here. The film then goes right back to being amazing, with this beautiful crane shot that sweeps around Flitwick as he starts casting protections, followed by a quick montage of a few of our favourite characters, tracking back into the sky before the glorious wides reveal the shield. Most sane people were probably grateful for the light relief in between these tense moments, but it threw me out of the scene. It was out of character and out of the blue, cut in with surgical precision to undermine the hard-earned tension. And to prove that I'm not just being a negative Norbert, there is some humour I like in this movie. As everyone knows, explaining humour is the best way for comedy to thrive, so let me go through the examples in exhaustive detail. Moments before the aforementioned mood killer, Neville questions McGonagall about blowing up the bridge. She says, "Boom!" And it's funny, but serious at the same time. And then she says, "Why don't you confer with Mr. Finnegan? As I recall, he has a particular proclivity for pyrotechnics." A particular proclivity for pyrotechnics. This alliterative gem is the best line Steve Kloves has ever written, and it provides a satisfying end to one of the great running gags of the film series. The performance is great too, with McGonagall clearly distracted, holding it together for the kids. Maggie Smith does a great job. It's also great when Harry first walks into the room of requirement and everyone bursts into applause. Neville's expression is perfect. This moment has huge main character chosen one energy, and I am here for it. I also like the gag Seamus makes about there being only one Harry. It's cheeky, in character, and the cut back to Ron is so clean.
Only a brother.
She had lots of those though. She's only one, Harry.
Shut up, Seamus.
Plus, it's always good to distract from the chemistry vacuum that is Hinny, am I right? So McGonagall has her tension-killing moment and the first half of the battle begins. Fred, George, Lupin and Tonks all get their foreshadowing shots. These scenes are epic. The visual effects are stunning, the special effects are rad. We get giants, knights, venomous tentacula. We get to fly around the castle. Quidditch gets cancelled. The stunts are grand. There's loads going on and it's awesome. Extras are jostling all over the place. Harry forces his way through the plot with Helena Ravenclaw. Hermione have their moment in the Chamber of Secrets, and it's fine. The box is ticked. Hinny have their moment, and nobody cares. It turns out that Neville has a death wish and is in love with Luna because Steve Kloves wanted him to be. It's fine. These moments wrap up storylines and keep the momentum flying. Then we're back into the room of requirement, and the set is full of old Hogwarts memorabilia. It's a treasure trove for fans, full of old props from the series. Cornish pixies fly through the air, and there's even a chess piece from the Philosopher's Stone. The CGI backgrounds look flawless. Before long, the ever-hapless Malfoy turns up with his cronies, and Goyle tries to murder Hermione. It's pretty dark. Then Ron does a funny boyfriend moment, and Hermione looks proud. This was another eye roll moment for me, but hey, maybe I'm being cynical. Then Ron runs back in another moment of light relief, shouting that Goyle has done a fiend fire. From here, they really nailed this scene. Everything about it is so cool. The swooping crane shots, the flaming CGI beasts, the lighting and direction, and Tom Felton as Malfoy is back to his snivelling best. I especially dig how the flame erupts into Voldemort heads when they destroy the Horcrux. This is some true wizarding mayhem, and I am all about it. Even Ron's line while they're flying, lifted from the book, is fun without killing the tension.
If we die for them, Harry, I'm gonna kill you!
Soon after, they launch into the best 2 minutes in the whole film, as the Golden Trio make their way through the raging war to get to the boathouse. Everything about this scene works. The giants, acromantulas, Fenrir Greyback turning Lavender into a werewolf, or worse, the production design, the sound mix where you hear this one Death Eater yell, which is pretty chilling. But most of all, it's the music from Alexander Desplat that sells it. In this scene, they're able to capture the chaos of magical warfare, which is an amazing filmmaking accomplishment. The track is appropriately called Courtyard Apocalypse, and it gives me tingles every time. After that, it's onto the Snape section, which again they totally crush, with a heartbreaking performance from Alan Rickman. Then Harry goes and sacrifices himself, and the pathos is real. He has his King's Cross moment with Dumbledore, and it's all faithful to the source material. Michael Gambon crushes this scene. But I'm not done ranting yet. Now that I've lavished praise on a big chunk of the movie, let's get to my next big bugbear, which is how they treated our boy. Nay, our man, Neville Longbottom. They almost nailed it. The first half of the film is played perfectly, and Matthew Lewis has just the right amount of swagger and confidence. He's still Neville, but now he's a leader of the Resistance. I mean, look at this pose. Neville can get it. Then it gets a little silly on the bridge, with his unnecessary taunts and pointless running. The Snatchers were going to have to use the bridge anyway. This is pointless Gryffindor crap. But whatever. It's a cool scene, and the filmmakers got their obligatory light-hearted moment in the battle out of the way. Neville still has his best moment to come. But here's the thing, and maybe fellow book readers will know where I'm going with this. They messed up Neville's big moment with Nagini. The first red flag is a small scene from the book which doesn't make it into the movie, where Harry lets Neville know that they must kill Nagini. You know, the snake, the final Horcrux, and also this human woman. Wait, what? No, ignore that last part. We're still in 2011 and everything is fine. Knowing that he has to kill the snake is an important motivation for Neville's big speech and eventual swish and flick of the old Gryffindor sword. The second red flag is when Neville just randomly finds the sorting hat amongst the rubble. I know the sorting hat has a history of convenience, but this was the start of the major deviations from the source material. It would have been cooler if Voldemort acioed it like he did in the book. And then we come to Neville's moment to shine, his famous Dumbledore's Army speech, where he rallies the troops just as all hope seems lost. Before you moan that I just dislike any deviations from the book, I actually prefer Neville's speech in the film, as it's more emotive. Here's how it goes in the book. "But you are a pureblood, aren't you, my brave boy?" Voldemort asked Neville, who stood facing him, his empty hands curled in fists. "So what if I am?" said Neville loudly. "You show spirit and bravery, and you come of noble stock. You will make a very valuable Death Eater. We need your kind. Neville Longbottom." "I'll join you when hell freezes over," said Neville. "Dumbledore's Army!" he shouted, and there was an answering cheer from the crowd, whom Voldemort's silencing charms seemed unable to hold. In the film, Neville gives a speech about love or whatever, and how Harry is still living inside them, and how the characters we've heard of didn't die in vain, etc. It's very Gryffindor. Now I'm ready to see Voldemort set him on fire. In the book, he plonks the sorting hat on Neville's head and says, "Neville here is now going to demonstrate what happens to anyone foolish enough to continue to oppose me," said Voldemort, and with a flick of his wand, he caused the sorting hat to burst into flames. Screams split the dawn, and Neville was aflame, rooted to the spot, unable to move, and Harry could not bear it. He must act, and then many things happened at the same moment. Hundreds of people attack from out of sight. Gorp shows up again, and the centaurs finally get involved. It's an epic rescue moment. Harry pulled the invisibility cloak from inside his robes, swung it over himself, and sprang to his feet, as Neville moved too. In one swift, fluid motion, Neville broke free of the bodybind curse upon him. The flaming hat fell off him, and he drew from its depths something silver, with a glittering rubied handle. With a single stroke, Neville sliced off the great snake's head, which spun high into the air, gleaming in the light flooding from the entrance hall. And Voldemort's mouth was open in a scream of fury that nobody could hear, and the snake's body thudded to the ground at his feet. It is a moment of pure triumph, and it happens in front of everyone. Neville becomes a legend. Us sophisticated book fans looked forward to seeing it on the big screen for years. But what did we get? In the film, Neville gives his speech and then suddenly whips out the sword of Gryffindor. And Harry can't let this dork steal his thunder, so he reveals that he's alive and shoots a pathetic curse at the snake. Hermione is like, "Lol," and Harry scampers off. Voldy is mad, and the other Death Eaters are like, "Screw this, we're going home." But still, the moment could work. Neville runs up with the sword, and Voldemort is like, "Lol, no thanks, mate," and blasts him into the Great Hall like a cartoon character. What? This was not what we expected. Us sophisticated, well-read, delightful book fans were shocked. What the heck was this? I bet the filmmakers were very pleased with themselves to surprise us like that. But I, for one, felt betrayed, and I still do. So why did they make this change? I imagine there was a lot of debate around how this scene should play out. Let's dive in. In the book, we have a new human army, loads of fighting giants, and a stampede of centaurs. I think it's fair to say this would have been nearly impossible to film with the set design they had, and could have pushed the budget to astronomical levels. And as for setting Neville's head on fire, perhaps the filmmakers were under pressure to land a PG-13 rating. But this epic intervention was the break in Voldemort's concentration that allowed Neville's big moment. So what to do for the film? We still need a distraction to precipitate the final battle. Writer Steve Kloves defaults to the obvious, which is to have the main character move the story forward. This in itself makes sense. We want our character's actions to drive the story. In the book, we have no idea what Harry's plan is. He probably doesn't even have one. He gets lucky with the intervention and uses his invisibility cloak to take advantage of the circumstances. No one knows for sure that he is still alive. In the film, Harry's actions move the plot forward, serve to terrify the Death Eaters into abandoning Voldy, and rejuvenate the good guys. Therefore, the filmmakers still had the distraction necessary to give Neville his big moment. By this reasoning, we know that shifting it to later in the film was a creative choice. One that bugs me to this day. So why did they make this creative choice if it wasn't for budgetary reasons? I think it was to surface two new scenes which the filmmakers wanted for the final battle. One where Harry and Voldemort have a fight on their own, and one where Hermione and Ron still have something to do. The snake was the final Horcrux, so it made sense for them to delay Neville's big moment and give us this creepy scene where Hermione tried to kill it. I don't love it, but I can see the reasoning. And this brings us to the last act, where the film totally diverges from the source material. Let's look at the final showdown. But first, let's remind ourselves how it went down in the book. After Neville kills Nagini, the new combatants force the Death Eaters into the entrance hall for the final showdown. Even the house elves get involved, bursting out of the kitchens waving carving knives and cleavers to hack and slash at the Death Eaters' shins. Let the record show that I am very glad they cut this particular moment from the movie. House elf dynamics in Harry Potter are problematic at best, but I digress. The battle is pure carnage, and Harry remains hidden under the invisibility cloak. Harry saw Yaxley slammed to the floor by George and Lee Jordan, saw Dolohov fall with a scream at Flitwick's hands, saw Walden McNair thrown across the room by Hagrid. He saw Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy running through the crowd, not even attempting to fight, screaming for their son. Voldemort was now dueling McGonagall, Slughorn and Kingsley all at once, and there was cold hatred in his face as they wove and ducked around him, unable to finish him. Wow, I will forever be sad that we didn't get this scene. There's so much action and so many powerful witches and wizards dueling. I had totally forgotten about Slughorn's redemption moment as well. The book goes on. Bellatrix was still fighting too, 50 yards away from Voldemort, and like her master she dueled 3 at once, Hermione, Ginny and Luna, all battling their hardest, but Bellatrix was equal to them, and Harry's attention was diverted as a killing curse shot so close to Ginny that she missed death by an inch. He changed course, running at Bellatrix rather than Voldemort. But before he had gone a few steps, he was knocked sideways. I'm pausing here to note how, in the book, this line makes total sense, but in the film would have looked strange. Imagine someone getting knocked in the invisibility cloak. How would you even film that in a way which doesn't look strange? Then Molly has her iconic moment and takes Bellatrix down in a 1v1 duel. I wanted to draw attention to one line from the book here. Jets of light flew from both wands. The floor around the witch's feet became hot and cracked. Both women were fighting to kill. Hot and cracked. This sentence is such an amazing cinematic visual. I almost can't believe they didn't put it in the film. In fact, in the film we don't get any wide shots of this duel at all. I'll come back to this point. So Molly gets the win, and the book continues. Voldemort screamed. Harry felt as though he turned in slow motion. He saw McGonagall, Kingsley and Slughorn blasted backward, flailing and writhing through the air, as Voldemort's fury at the fall of his last best lieutenant exploded with the force of a bomb. Voldemort raised his wand and directed it at Molly Weasley. It's only then that Harry reveals himself. Let's take a look at how the film diverges from these moments. As the combatants enter the Great Hall, editor Mark Day cuts to this beautiful shot of the Malfoys escaping in disgrace. The music swells, and we leave these important characters behind for the last time. This shot serves 2 purposes. It wraps up the Malfoy storyline nicely, and also hides the convenient location change for Harry and Voldy's 1v1. We leave Harry running away from the Great Hall in a blink and you miss it shot that lasts for just 19 frames, less than a second. We cut to the Malfoys and then back to Harry, now alone in a random corridor, presumably trying to lure Voldemort. This doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it. In the Great Hall, Harry was surrounded by powerful allies. Why does he need to go it alone? Because the filmmakers want a final one-on-one between Harry and Voldemort for their epic showdown finale. David Yates has said as much.
In the book, the standoff between Harry and Voldemort happens in the Great Hall. I just wanted to develop more of a battle.
The music stops here, and we have these hauntingly beautiful shots of a ruined Hogwarts, with student bodies littering the ground. I'm sure Madame Pomfrey will sort them right out later. Voldemort apparates onto the endless staircases. Just listen to that snap. This is a gorgeous new set made specifically for the last film, and the two duke it out. All we hear is the crisp sound design of the spells and Voldemort's snarls. These visual effects are so well executed, the light glinting in Voldy's eyes. Everything slaps. Then Harry runs off and Voldy gives chase, leaving the snake vulnerable. Hermione pops up out of nowhere and launches a perfectly aimed rock at the snake. It's a small thing, but why is her aim so good all of a sudden? And then we start crosscutting, which means alternating between scenes for dramatic effect. Crosscutting in the final showdown is a convention in many big movie franchises, since it offers a cinematic way to show scale and increase tension. In Star Wars A New Hope, you have the trench run on its own. In The Empire Strikes Back, you crosscut between the escape from Cloud City and Luke and Vader's duel. In Return of the Jedi, you crosscut between the Battle of Endor, Lando's Death Star run, and Luke's confrontation with the Emperor. In The Phantom Menace, you crosscut between 4 scenes: Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul, Anakin's Naboo fighter escapades, Queen Amidala's Viceroy capture, and the Gungan battle. It's a lot, but at least it's exciting, right? So what do we crosscut to in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2? When the tension is at an all-time high, you guessed it, we get another gag in the form of our fallen hero, Neville Longbottom. He sits up, groggy, with a flaming body flying past his stupid head. Again, it is meant to lighten the mood, and wow does it succeed. To be fair, it is also supposed to be heroic, which we can gather from the music. And then he sees the sword of Gryffindor just lying around. I know, this is a magical fantasy land, and it's not a real war, etc, etc. But it feels like a joke to me, like they couldn't resist one last final humiliation for Neville. I'm really curious to see how other people feel about this scene. Am I being harsh? Drop a comment below. And then we cut back to Harry versus Voldemort, and we're at the top of the tower. At this point, the location is just an excuse for cool visuals, and I'm here for it. Voldy does some cool magic with his robes, choking Harry. And we cut back to the snake, which Hermione are still trying to take down. Okay, this is unnecessary, but it has to happen now that they've butchered Neville's moment. So why did they shoot these new scenes instead of following the book? It's useful to look at the filmmaking challenges the book posed. For one, the invisibility cloak would have been difficult, and would have left Harry a bystander in the battle for an uncomfortably long time. There's also no filmmaking precedent for using magic from underneath the cloak. Would Harry have had to swing his hand out from underneath? That would have looked incredibly goofy. Then there's the scene blocking and shot composition. The Great Hall of our imaginations can be as big as we need it to be, but the filmmaking set is surprisingly small in real life. Showing that many duels in such a concentrated space would have risked looking silly, with everyone too close for comfort. Remember McGonagall and Snape's duel here? The space was the perfect size for a one-on-one, not for the final carnage of the book. Each shot would have been far too chaotic. This scale of space is a key difference in the mediums of books and movies. We do get a glimpse of how a movie version of the book events would have looked in the duel between Molly and Bellatrix. To get into the scene, there is an amazing match cut from Nagini poised to strike to a snarling Bellatrix firing at Ginny. A match cut is where the composition of two sequential shots are matched by the action or subject. The most famous example is from 2001, A Space Odyssey. Molly then steps onto the bench, Julie Walters delivers the iconic line, and we're into the duel. The choice to have them on the bench reveals just how hard it must have been to block these action scenes. Placing them there allows the filmmakers to go straight into shot reverse shot, without ever having an establishing wide shot, which would have to feature dozens of other duels and the general chaos of the battle. We've spent many scenes in the Great Hall, and we know how the tables and benches fit into the space. Notice how we never get a wide shot of the two dueling, and just one or two over-the-shoulder shots to confirm that they are in the same space. This shot structure allows the filmmakers to stay in mid-shots of our subjects and never linger on the wider chaos of the scene. To see why they wanted to avoid this, let's take a look at some of those background fights, which are so skillfully obscured with a shallow depth of field. The wand choreography looks great in the background, but dare I say, might look more like dancing up close and in focus. It's fun in its own right, but not the vibe for a wizarding war. In fact, the whole series did a great job of avoiding this potential pitfall, with official wand choreographer Paul Harris devising a cool wand dueling system for Order of the Phoenix. Overall, it's amazing they were able to make wizard duels look as cool as they did. Anyway, so Molly explodes Bellatrix, and then smiles. This is odd, right? I did not like this take, as it felt out of character and vengeful to me. Fred is still dead, Molly. It's not clear how Molly reacts to her successful murder in the book, but I always imagined a look of grim satisfaction, tinged with sadness that it came to this. Not a smile. Oh well, after Molly smokes Bellatrix in the book, Harry reveals himself and ends up circling around with Voldemort in the ultimate stare down. They do some trash talking, and then Harry reveals that Snape wasn't all bad after all. Severus Snape wasn't yours, said Harry. Snape was Dumbledore's. Dumbledore's from the moment you started hunting down my mother. Then they go over some more plot to do with the Elder Wand, and I'm glad they cut this from the film, because it gets a little convoluted. You still don't get it, Riddle, do you? Possessing the wand isn't enough. Holding it, using it, doesn't make it really yours. Didn't you listen to Ollivander? The wand chooses the wizard. The Elder Wand recognized the new master before Dumbledore died. Someone who never even laid a hand on it. Sure, okay, plot point. They eventually cast a spell. Avada Kedavra! Expelliarmus! Harry's spell wins out because of the Elder Wand shenanigans, and here's how it goes. Voldemort fell backward, arms splayed, the slit pupils of the scarlet eyes rolling upward. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality. These paragraphs floored me back in 2007. Let's get back to the film and see how it handles Voldemort's ultimate demise. We kick off with a straight backhand to Harry. Heck yeah, this is the kind of violence I'm here for, let's get it. In the film version of events, Voldemort has no idea that Bellatrix, his last best lieutenant, has been exploded. This is a shame, as Bellatrix and Voldemort's relationship is weird and interesting, and deserved a conclusion in the movie franchise. Steve Kloves uses this scene to get through the Elder Wand plot points, but there's no mention of Snape betraying Voldemort by being on Dumbledore's side. This is another missed opportunity in my opinion. After 8 films, we want to see Voldemort get wrecked, not just killed. And this includes him seeing Bellatrix killed and finding out Snape's true nature. It feels like justice, and the film denies it to us. Then they have a cozy hug and jump to what Harry must assume will be their death. And then we're into one of the most controversial scenes amongst the fandom, the flying fight. When I first watched this movie, I was so thrown off by the changes from the book that at this point, I didn't know what was going on. Watching it now, I love this scene. It is so visceral and cinematic. Voldemort tries to rip Harry's head open. The idea of the link between the two becomes literal, and Harry's fears of being like Voldemort are made real. Two sides of the same coin, good and evil. We're left to wonder, who's laughing at who? It is gnarly and violent in a way that the rest of this movie circumvents. You feel the hatred these two have for each other in a way which is pure cinema. This scene would not work nearly as well in book form. And here comes my most pedantic nitpick of this whole video. Okay, the rock that Harry knocks out of the way is clearly too light to be real. It bounces away without any weight, revealing itself to be a piece of the set. Maybe I'm the only person in the world that this bugs, but I always noticed it. Anyway, then they do a priori incantatem, but not that thing, of locking their spells together in a pretty beam. Some fans moan about the overuse of this wand effect, but I'm cool with it since it looks so rad. We start cross-cutting with Hermione again, as Nagini goes in for the kill. Somewhere around here they deleted a jokey scene where Ron wants to tell Hermione he loves her.
I don't want you to say anything that you wouldn't say if we weren't about to be killed by a giant snake.
Thank goodness, that would have been another tension killer. Anyway, just when it looks like all hope is lost and our new couple are going to be snake food, we finally get Neville's hero moment, as he decapitates the snake in one swift stroke. Nagini bursts into dust for some reason, which I don't love, but the hero shot is cool at least. Then we are back to the fight, where both actors give great takes for the moment they realise that Voldemort can finally be killed. One last wand melt, and Voldemort turns into dandruff and fades away. Just like that. Can you tell that I'm not a fan of this choice? And yes, I do get it. Voldemort had shed so much of his humanity with the Horcruxes that there was nothing left, yada yada, but I'm not buying it. It feels like a pulled punch. Tom Riddle's corpse is important, proof that the mythology around Voldemort was just that, a story, and that in the end, he was just a fallible human being, one capable of the most horrendous evil. His dead body plays a key role in the book. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality, his body feeble and shrunken, the white hands empty, the snake-like face vacant and unknowing. Voldemort was dead, killed by his own rebounding curse, and Harry stood with two wands in his hand, staring down at his enemy's shell. They moved Voldemort's body and laid it in a chamber off the hall, away from the bodies of Fred, Tonks, Lupin, Colin Creevey, and 50 others who had died fighting him. This is the reality of the world, and having Bellatrix and Voldemort vanish into thin air dehumanizes them, giving our heroes a free pass for killing them. It's as if the film is saying, it's okay to kill them because they were no longer human anyway. There's no moral grey area left, and it's not like the film is afraid of showing a few dead bodies, although I'm sure they're officially just unconscious. My last point on this is a pedantic one, of course. Who in the name of Merlin is going to believe that Voldemort is actually gone? No one but Harry saw him die. Again, Voldemort does have a history of coming back, you know. And while we're on the subject of bodies, let's talk about the good guy deaths in this movie, all of which happen off screen. I wanted to see the light leave their eyes, darn it. In the book, the fact that Harry is not around when Lupin and Tonks get killed makes total sense. We follow the whole story through Harry in third-person narration, so we find out about their deaths when he does, and it hits hard. As Ginny and Hermione moved closer to the rest of the family, Harry had a clear view of the bodies lying next to Fred, Remus and Tonks, pale and still and peaceful looking, apparently asleep beneath a dark, enchanted ceiling. But in the film, we've already established cross-cutting between different characters. We could have cut the pointless scenes with Nagini and Hermione and seen a Tonks-Lupin last stand. But ultimately, I respect the choice to save the gut punch for Harry and the audience to have together. What I do disagree with, though, is our good old fan favourite Fred getting snuffed off screen. This is the moment when the battle gets real in the books, and the arbitrariness of death in war is experienced firsthand by the characters. You actually are joking, Percy. I don't think I've ever heard you joke since you were... The air exploded. No, 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 someone was shouting. No, Fred, no! And Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, and Fred's eyes stared without seeing, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. This is such a powerful, surprising moment in the book, and it gets even more real and grim when Harry has to move the body. Harry stooped to seize Fred's body under the armpits. Percy, realizing what Harry was trying to do, stopped clinging to the body and helped. Together, crouching low to avoid the curses flying at them from the grounds, they hauled Fred out of the way. "Here," said Harry, and they placed him in a niche where a suit of armor had stood earlier. Percy is the key element in these paragraphs, having finally redeemed himself and rejoined his family, only to see his brother snatched away by a stray curse. To be clear, this wouldn't have made sense in the film. Percy was a small part of the film franchise, and his storyline at the Ministry was a good cut to make. Nevertheless, the opportunity for pathos here was huge. George could have filled in for Percy easily, and we'd have all cried our eyes out. Instead, we're left to imagine how it happened, which for some people might be better. In fact, the whole Battle of Hogwarts feels strangely sanitized. In the books, death feels more real and concrete. For example, there's a paragraph where Neville is carrying corpses into the Great Hall, slung across his shoulders. It's gruesome. There's also an infuriating moment in the Ravenclaw common room, where Amicus Carrow spits in McGonagall's face. Then, Harry pulled the cloak off himself, raised his wand, and said, "You shouldn't have done that." As Amicus spun around, Harry shouted, "Crucio!" The Death Eater was lifted off his feet. He writhed through the air like a drowning man, thrashing and howling in pain. And then, with a crunch and a shattering of glass, he smashed into the front of a bookcase and crumpled, insensible, to the floor. "I see what Bellatrix meant," said Harry, the blood thundering through his brain. "You need to really mean it." Whew. This paragraph is so intense and makes film Harry look like a wet blanket by comparison. I would have loved to see David Yates dive into Harry's darker side here. There's even precedent for this in the movies, where Harry unsuccessfully tries to crucio Bellatrix in Order of the Phoenix, which is the very scene Book Harry is referring to. Don't get me wrong, I don't think anyone wanted to see an actual spitting scene realised on film, but there were plenty of opportunities for Harry to do a crucio, and I would have liked to see that grey area explored. Alas, I imagine this all came down to business. It is a family franchise after all, and they had to land that sweet PG-13 rating. At this point you may be thinking I just disliked it when they made changes from the book, and you would be partially right, but I also liked a bunch of the changes they made. For example, moving the McGonagall-Snape kerfuffle to the main hall instead of a random corridor like it is in the books is a good move. It's more cinematic in the Great Hall. There's also a great touch where Snape deflects McGonagall's spells into the Carrows. Although there will always be a part of me that wants to see the scene as it played out in the books, with all the cool magic moments, such as a ring of fire that filled the corridor and flew like a lasso at Snape. Then it was no longer fire, but a great black serpent that McGonagall blasted to smoke, which reformed and solidified in seconds to become a swarm of pursuing daggers. Snape avoided them only by forcing the suit of armour in front of him, and with echoing clangs the daggers sank, one after another. I'm also in the camp of loving the Draco Voldemort hug. It is just so bizarre and creepy. Ralph Fiennes kills it in this scene. According to Tom Felton, this was an improvised moment that was never even in the script. I love it. Not showing the Ravenclaw common room also made sense to me. I know a lot of fans, myself included, were looking forward to the scenes there where Harry and Luna are looking for the lost diadem, but these scenes are not needed to progress the story, and we get to keep the Ravenclaw common rooms of our imaginations. I also like that the film swaps characters for the Patronus scene. In the book, it's Luna, Ernie and Seamus who cast the spell, but in the film it's Aberforth who casts the Patronus that wipes away the Dementors. I dig this because it answers a question the film poses earlier on, as to whether Aberforth has lost hope in the world. Not with that beautiful Patronus he hasn't. I am also a huge fan of the cinematography in this film by Eduardo Serra. It looks gorgeous from start to finish. There are so many awesome shot compositions and camera tracking shots. The desaturated, muted look of the Half-Blood Prince gives way to fiery oranges and flashing magic sparks. Just look at Harry's eyes shining in this shot. In fact, they look just like his mother's. Wait, what? The score is great too. Composer Alexander Desplat does a terrific job of building tension, sadness, and even joy at various times in the movie. It's also great, if a little corny, to hear the classic John Williams motif at key heroic moments for Harry. Wow, it turns out I still have a lot to say about this movie. So where do I stand now, and how do I wrap up this rant? For me, rewatching Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was cathartic. I had been disappointed after my first viewing that long night 10 years ago, and had barely revisited the franchise since. Now, with some distance, and the maturity of at least a 20-year-old, I can see that my original reaction was a tale of hype and expectations. In many ways, this movie marks the culmination of my childhood, and my head was filled with all the fantastic magic from the final book. Magic that would be near impossible to realise on film. In fact, I don't think I've ever been so excited for a movie before or since, so of course my standards were never going to be met. Sure, there are aspects of the film I still don't like, and I will die mad about Neville's butchered moment and Voldemort disintegrating. But overall, this is an amazing movie. It's not quite the movie I wanted, but it never could have been. It had to appeal to a broader, PG audience. It had to be simple enough for Gryffindors to enjoy, but intricate enough to amuse us Ravenclaws. And most of all, it had to work visually, and not just in the reader's imagination. So with the benefit of hindsight, I am amazed at how much they were able to get right, and that they were able to end the series on a high note, and just leave it at that. Oh no. In all seriousness, it's incredible that the cast and crew were able to make it to the end of an 8-part series, with such a clean record of good to great movies. How many other franchises have we seen struggle to reach these heights? Quite a few, huh? The 3 main cast members were so young when they were cast, and they all stuck it out to the end, improving along the way. With all the interdependencies and variables involved in filmmaking, we may never see anything like the Harry Potter movie series again. So while I may not have remembered the Battle of Hogwarts, I will never forget Harry Potter. Thanks for watching. This is my second YouTube video, and I am nervous to see if everyone hates me for it. If you liked the video, please do like, comment and subscribe. Maybe even hit that bell. It took me over 80 hours to make this, and I have a full-time job, so you won't get annoying notifications often, I promise. Cheers!